Hello, writers. Come write with me. My name is Mykela Greenwood. I create worlds for mind adventures. Welcome to my YouTube channel, Write with Mykela. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell so you can go on this journey with me. Today is story time, or the day of our chapter exchange. I am hoping to continue to get chapters from you. Don't leave us hanging. If you've already sent, say, chapters 1 through 10, don't forget to send the next one. I'm releasing 2 videos on some Tuesdays to read your writing from your writing prompts, and 2 videos on some Fridays to read your chapters, for those of you where I have permission to read your chapters on the channel. So basically, your work will be extra videos, but everything else will be the same for my viewers. If you're writing with me and wish to exchange chapters, then I need written permission to read your chapter on the channel, along with your name or pen name and age. I also need permission from your parent or legal guardian if you are under 18 years of age. If you're under 18 and have guardian permission, then I will need a pen name to read your material. Writers may send their chapters in PDF or Word document format to writewithmykela@gmail.com. Mykela is spelled M-Y-K-E-L-A, and write is W-R-I-T-E, like right. So writewithmykela@gmail.com. Please do not send Google Docs. I'm not making any promises to read every chapter sent to me on the channel, but I intend to read all the chapters sent. All chapters read on Fridays, whether they are mine or another writer's work, are copyright protected material, and no one may use any part in writing their own story. I want to remind everyone that this story is at least PG-13, meaning if you are under 13 years of age, you need parental guidance. This story is in its rough draft stage. As you know, the title of the story is City of the Ancients, and today we are reading chapter 13, Castle Westpolk. Let's start. Kirsha calmed some after she felt like the distance was greater between her and the dissenters. She again placed her hands on the wall, and again she could see out. This time she didn't see anyone beside the castle. Her mind wanted to ask her, what if they were in the castle? But she pushed those thoughts away. Kirsha looked over to Kirian and Kilty, and they were waiting on her. She realized that she had tried to hide and she had forgotten about them. "I'm sorry," she said. "I should have protected you. Protected us from what?" asked Kirian. Kirsha motioned. "From the dissenters. They were just outside. I knew they were traveling fast. Thankfully, we made it inside the castle before they saw us. For now, they have passed us." "You obviously know more than we do," said Kirian calmly, as he could. Kirsha sighed. "Let's go up in the castle. I want to find a room to be alone for a little while, so I can calm down. You and Kilty can explore a bit. Then we'll sit down together and I will tell you some of the things I know." Kirian accepted that. He saw some stables and led the horse off to them. Thankfully, water flowed through the trough for the horse. He would have to figure out what to do about food later. He came back out and gathered up some of their things. He headed up to the castle. Kilty scooped up some things. She especially grabbed up her medicine and bandages, and she followed Kirian. Kirsha looked back to the wall once more before she too scooped up some things and followed. She wondered about the window she saw. She thought maybe she was losing her mind. But she would talk to someone in the ultrarium and find out what was going on. Kirian found some bedrooms and put some things in 2 of the rooms. He found a room with books and chairs and oil lanterns, so he asked Kirsha if that was a room she wanted her alone time in. Kirsha agreed. Then he and Kilty set about to explore. After Kirsha was sure they were gone, she pulled out her orb and asked to speak to her grandfather. I'm sorry, said a scientist, but your grandfather has left for the day. Kirsha thought a moment. Okay, how about Revis? Is there a Commander Revis? We can try to find either, said another scientist, who also got up and touched the sphere. A third scientist joined them. While we try to locate them, said the third scientist, do you have any questions that we might could answer? Well, I guess so, replied Kirsha. She asked about the window, and was it there, or was she crazy? The scientist answered that the castle had many defenses, and told her some of them. Kirsha then asked about feeling the dissenters, and was that possible, or how was that possible? The scientists glanced around, and they took their turns telling Kirsha some of the theories and hypotheses about feeling or connecting telepathically with the dissenters. They saved the inhabitation theory for last. Before Kirsha could respond, Commander Revis and her grandfather arrived. One scientist said, I know you can look in your orb and see us, but I wanted to let you know your grandfather and Commander Revis are here. Thanks, replied Kirsha. You've given me a lot to think about. She then asked Commander Revis how to fight a dissenter. Commander Revis at first said he probably wasn't the person to ask, but then he told her of several of his fights, including his last fight with Farsnal. Then she asked her grandfather if there was anything that he wanted to add. At first he said no, but then he told her that when dissenters inhabit a person, you might not know they're there, but the person will act strange. Then Kirsha and her grandfather said in near unison, That's why your adopting parents acted so differently sometimes. Kirsha looked in the orb at the man that was her grandfather. Then she saw two figures add to the circle. Mom and Dad? Yes, we are here, they replied. We are out here and the dissenters are chasing us. Kirian and Kilty need to know. How much do I tell them tonight? Before I answer, started Arisha, I never knew. Well, I saw Dante and couldn't bear to watch. There was nothing I could do to help, but, well, my question is, what she wants to know, started a scientist, and really all of us scientists want to know it, too, is did Majority, one of the dissenters, ever inhabit you or try to inhabit you? Arisha nodded her appreciation to the scientist. I don't know, stated Kirsha. Would I know that? Would I know if a dissenter inhabited my mind or body? I mean, Kirsha closed her eyes as she remembered the pain in the back of her head that was far worse than the beating Dante gave her. Dante would tie her up and beat her, but then he would leave and she would feel a piercing pain in the back of her head. She would focus on pushing the pain out. When she was older, the spiders came, and Dante would run away. She could escape the barn before she received the pain in her head. She thought through the theories and realized that she felt a dissenter. At least she felt him more strongly than the rest. What was the name you said? My something? Majority, replied the mother. Not as strong as Farsnal when they both were alive. Now Majority may be stronger. How would I know if he had inhabited me? Because I'm sure now he certainly attempted it. Kirsha, I'm so very sorry you went through all of that, replied Arisha. Your question was how much to tell Kirian and Kilty. How ready were you to hear all of this, especially with how much you went through? We can't answer that question. Tell them as much as they can take, then rest. There is no hurry to leave the castle. Let them practice their spells. Can I show them my orb? Will someone from here talk to them? How do I know they're not inhabited? Xantrix will help you know, stated Auric. You can use Xantrix with Kyrian. You used Xantrix with Kyrian before. Of course, Kyrian relaxed and allowed you access. If they're not inhabited, started Apont, then show them your orb. No guarantees on them talking with us because that depends a lot on them. Kirsha thanked everyone in the circle and said her goodbyes. Kirsha left to find Kyrian and Kilty. She found them in the treasure room, and Kilty was playing in the coins like she would play in the sand. They found some place comfortable, and then Kirsha started telling them things without using Xantrix first. She started with her childhood and the things Dante did and what she could remember about Majority. She told about the dissenters inhabiting her parents and how she didn't know that until recently. Neither Kyrian nor Kilty knew how to respond. Kilty stared wide-eyed at Kirsha, and she glanced at Kyrian a few times. Kirsha wasn't sure if she should go on or not, but she was ready to share her hope. She had found an orb key, so they had hope of finding the city and getting Kilty her cure. She started with how she explored the castle while Kilty slept. She told of the secret passages she found. Then she slowed down in her telling as she told of climbing down into the graveyard and finding the staff. She told about the stars above, the names on the tombstones. Then she slid the wooden needle out of her dress and told how she grabbed the staff and how it shrank. She stood up and the staff became large. She hoped it didn't reveal the orb yet, and it didn't. She briefly paused her story and asked if they remembered the stone staff they had found. Kyrian said he did, but he admitted he had left it at their house. No, I put it in the wagon, replied Kirsha. It was there when we got out and retrieved our things. Can I touch the staff? Asked Kilty. Of course, replied Kirsha. Kilty got up and touched the staff and felt its smooth surface. Now, my story is not finished, stated Kirsha. She then told them of going up the stairs to the top of the tower. She told of putting the staff in the hole and turning it a quarter turn. She slightly raised the staff and put it back on the ground and turned it. Then she motioned to where the pestle was in the tower, and she told them about it. She told them about the beautiful orb. And at that moment, the top of the staff opened and revealed the orb key. Kirsha took the orb and shrank the staff back down. She put the staff in a pocket of her apron for now, and sat back down. Can I hold the orb key? Asked Kilty excitedly. Kyrian was extra quiet. Kirsha glanced at him. In a moment. Kyrian? Are you okay? Yeah. It's just a lot, stated Kyrian. There's more if you're ready, replied Kirsha. Kyrian knew Kirsha was ready to tell, and that was rare. So he nodded and told her to continue. Kirsha then told them of the conversations she had and the feelings she had. She even told of testing the word of the voices. She admitted to Kyrian that the voices told her she should marry him. I'm sorry. I didn't tell you all of this before. It seemed, I don't know. I can't explain it. Now, it might be possible for you to talk to someone there in the ultrarium, but I don't know. She held the orb towards Kilty. You want to try first? Oh, yes! Exclaimed Kilty. Then she looked at Kyrian. You don't look so good, she stated. Kilty, it's a lot of information, and Kyrian and I have things to talk about once you go to bed. So let him digest this news, and you talk to someone. Who are you going to talk to? I don't know, replied Kilty. Mom and Dad and Grandpa and And Amy, my real parents are still alive? She hugged the orb to herself. Oh, I can't believe it. I bet they're so wonderful. I bet they would give me nice clothes and food, just like you and Kirian have. I bet Grandpa would tell me a story. Do you think he would? Kirsha chuckled. I don't know. Why don't you try and see? Hello, is there anyone there? This is Kilty. I'm looking for my mom and dad and my grandpa and a lady named Amy. Arisha and Arik clasped their hands and smiled at each other. Apont chuckled. Ah, to be young. He reached out his hand and touched the sphere. This is Grandpa. How are you? It is very nice to meet you. Kilty held out the orb towards Kirsha. I got an answer. Yes, I heard, stated Kirsha. She turned to Kirian. Did you hear? Kirian slightly nodded his head. Yes, I heard. Kilty told her grandpa she wanted a story. Apont chuckled and told her there would be a time for that, but she should greet her mother and father first. Kilty greeted them and asked when she could meet them. They gently told her that they had locked themselves away to protect their knowledge, but she could use her own orb key and unlock their city together with Kirsha and Kirian. Then Amy arrived. Amy wasn't sure why someone had summoned her, but she said hello to Kilty. Kilty exclaimed, Oh, it's so nice to meet you. I'm glad you spoke with Kirsha. She said she was angry when she spoke to you, but you stayed calm and answered her questions. I want to be like you. Amy smiled and blushed. Why, thank you, dear. When you get here, I can show you what I do. Really? Exclaimed Kilty. Kilty spoke to several more of the scientists after one of the scientists suggests that she look in to see her parents. Kilty looked in and then said there were a lot of people there. After a little bit, Kilty said, Well, I need to let Kirian have his turn. She handed over the orb to Kirian. Kirian wasn't sure he wanted to speak to any of them. He felt a bit sick to his stomach. He remembered Kirsha yelling that she hated them, and at that point he thought they were dead, and it was wrong to hate the dead, and maybe Mr. Volkov had already told them about the parents being in the ultrarium, but it hadn't registered with him. Now he knew they were alive and well, and they had let Kirsha suffer some horrible things. After a few minutes, Kirian told the crowd that he really wasn't ready to speak to anyone. He apologized and said maybe after he digested all the information, he could try again. Arik said, We understand, son, and we are here. I had wonderful adopting parents, and you must know that we had no idea things would turn out this way. We are very sorry for your suffering. Kirian acknowledged his father, then passed the orb back to Kirsha. Kirsha said her goodbyes and then returned the orb to the staff. She put the staff back on the string around her neck and dropped it under her dress. Kirsha knew she and Kirian needed to talk, but they needed to talk without Kilty present, so she asked if they found anything more than the treasure room. They ate a bit of their food and then went exploring again. After a while, they split up to explore different things. Kirsha and Kirian both thought of the horse and explored down around the courtyard. Kirsha found drawers and shelves of food and bubbles of some material. She found some flat donut-shaped things that were white. She opened it and tasted it. It tasted like an apple, only sweeter. She tasted a few more things before she came to grass or hay wrapped in a bubble. She decided to bring it to the horse to see if he would eat it. Kirian found the remnants of an overgrown garden. He found tall grasses and weeds, but he also saw some fruit trees. Kirian looked around as there seemed to be sun shining, but he knew he was still in the castle. He thought of the graveyard Kirsha had told him about, and decided the garden had the same magic. He picked some fruit and stepped on fruit that had fallen off the tree. He then pulled up some of the grass and weeds to see if the horse would like it. Kilty had explored a little while, but then she got her magic book and took it down to the courtyard. She thought it might be easier to work water spells if she were near some water. Both Kirian and Kirsha glanced at Kilty sitting and reading in the courtyard as they headed to the barn. Then they met at the barn and told each other of their finds. After they fed the horse, they joined Kilty. Kilty was working a spell. Kirsha and Kirian weren't sure, but they saw bubbles rising up out of the river into the air. "I did it!" exclaimed Kilty as she glanced to her sides at her brother and sister. "Did you see that?" "Yes, we did," replied Kirsha. "It's not very useful, I know," stated Kilty. "Well, not yet, but what if something was in the water that you wanted to get out?" asked Kirsha. "Like maybe..." She looked down in her lap and then looked over to Kirian's lap. "Like maybe a grape." "Kirian, toss a grape in the water." Kirian plucked a grape off the vine and held it up for Kilty to see, and then he tossed it in the river. Kilty immediately said her spell. The water bubbled, enveloped the grape, and brought it to her. Kilty was very happy. "Yay!" "You probably should dry it with your apron before you eat it," stated Kirsha. Kilty dried the grape. "Did you say it was a grape? What is a grape?" They explained that a grape was a fruit, and so Kilty popped it in her mouth. She exclaimed it had juice in it, and it was sweet and delicious. Then they tried the rest of the food Kirian and Kirsha had gathered. Afterwards, they headed up to the reading room. Kilty said she didn't feel like reading or exploring, and she was going to take a nap. Kirian and Kirsha nodded their consent, and then they sat in the reading room several minutes in silence. "Kirian," started Kirsha finally, "well, of course you know that all my knowledge isn't from the book, The City of the Ancients. But some is from the people in the Ultrarium." Kirian nodded. Kirsha then proceeded to tell him about giving Kilty to the people in the city. "No," stated Kirian firmly. "Just no. I'm not okay with my real parents giving me up. I'm not okay with them giving you up. Now, I don't think things were so bad for me, but the horrible things you went through started at a very young age. They used these orb things to check on us, but instead of rescuing you, they had Kilty and abandoned her. We are not giving Kilty up. We are not just handing her over to strangers, be they our real parents or not, because we are not like them." Kirian continued ranting and raging for several more minutes. Kirsha knew Kirian wasn't normally like that. She knew he was mostly calm, so she just let him talk. She felt the pain he expressed, and she remembered telling her parents that she hated them. After a while, Kirian calmed down, and Kirsha told him the options they had as she saw them. She stated that they needed to think about all their options, and they couldn't really make a decision until they had the orb keys. Then Kirsha told what she could about the dissenters and how her father tortured her mother. She amended now that she thought a dissenter probably had already inhabited her father, but she didn't know. She then told of her own memories of the pain in the back of her head after Dante beating her. Kirian knew it was hard for her to talk about, and he knew she was probably putting some things together based on the conversations she had with people in the Ultrarium. He now more understood what she meant when she said torture. His mind briefly went to the scars she should have, and he remembered her saying a spell to smooth out Kilty's skin. At this point, he didn't want to wait to get Kilty's cure until after they had placed a set of siblings. He certainly didn't want to place his own children with someone else. So it seemed they needed to find the orb keys and replace or unlock the ultrarium. But something bothered Kirsha about that plan as well. Then he remembered seeing Kirsha touch the wall and hiding afterwards. He asked her, "When you touched the wall, did you see something?" Kirsha looked at Kirian, startled. "Oh, Kirian, we barely made it in the castle. The dissenters, in their natural form, can move very fast. They stopped outside the castle wall briefly. I think they were looking for tracks. There were 15 to 20 of them. The wall became like a window for me, and then I thought if I could look out, then they could look in." She thought through things a moment. "I'm really sorry I didn't think to protect you and Kilty." "Well, it was good for you to hide," stated Kirian. "And I'll be more mindful next time. You still hide, because you have the most magic. Even Kilty did a spell before me." They both chuckled. "Do you think there is an orb here?" Kirian asked. "I believe the orb keys are in 3 of the castles. Now, why was mine at Castle Northpole? I don't know. If I had guessed, I would have thought my orb was here." "Because it is closer to your village," put in Kirian. "But were these left by the last siblings, or the first ones? If it was the last ones, then... well, of course we would have to leave orb keys as well as siblings. But where I was going with my thoughts is the book said something about the orb key calling the siblings. You had trouble enough. You didn't need your orb key so close to you." Kirsha agreed that made sense. Once again, they headed off to explore the castle. They did leave a note to Kilty that they were exploring. Even though the layout of this castle wasn't the same as Castle Northpole, Kirsha noticed similarities. She wasn't necessarily looking for the orb, but she did hope Kirian found it. When she found hers, it was such a special and private moment that she wanted to give Kirian space. Then she came to a bedroom with lots of linens and laces and clothes. She decided to try some things on after she looked through the linens and laces. Kirsha put on some clothes and then looked in the mirror. She felt like she was wearing something her real grandmother would have worn. It matched the style of her grandfather. She liked it very much. Then she noticed some of the overcoats of the scientists. As Kirsha leaned in the wardrobe to grab the coat, she had these thoughts in her head. "We wore the same wedding dress, so that connects us. You have to hear me, Kirsha." Kirsha shook her head to herself. She thought, "This is Kirsha. I am me. I wore Miss Brocklin's wedding dress." "Ah, it's working! It's working! Oh, Kirsha, Mr. Parsons gave us a book to learn telepathy. He said there had to be a connection between the 2 people for telepathy to work. Oh, I reached you. I really wanted to let you know about the 3 deaths we had here in North Point Villa." Kirsha was a little confused, but she continued to listen. "Someone killed Mr. Volkov, but he had no papers or files or anything. Someone killed Dr. Highhands. Whosoever killed him ransacked his place. And then someone killed Mr. Parsons' wife, Patsy. Mr. Parsons has all the birth, death, and marriage records, but nothing else. Who knows the information Dr. Highhands had? Are you still with me?" "Yes, Miss Brooklyn, I'm with you." "Oh, call me Bonnie," thought Mrs. Brooklyn. "If we had a closer relationship sooner, I could have thought this to you sooner." Miss Brooklyn thought through everything that had happened and how they thought it was dissenters. She told how some of them thought when the ancients won, they locked the dissenters away. But the book said the ancients were the ones locked away. She told about the guns the men were making and how they were taking post. Kirsha then thought to Bonnie that the dissenters were after her and that her, Kirian, and Kilty were able to hide and let the dissenters pass them. Bonnie thought the question of how to kill dissenters, and Kirsha thought the same as anyone or anything else, but to make sure the last blow was with guns and not with magic. Kirsha laughed slightly. Bonnie protested at first about magic, but Kirsha asked her how she would describe telepathy. Bonnie didn't know for sure and left it at that. She did question whether or not all the dissenters had left the village, or was there a way for Kirsche to know that. Kirsche didn't know. She hadn't known the dissenters were in the village in the first place. She just knew they chased Kirian, Kilty, and herself. They thought their goodbyes, and Kirsche continued going through the wardrobe. Bonnie privately told her husband of her conversation with Kirsche, and Cherix passed around the news that he thought the dissenters might be chasing the kids, since they couldn't find them. But no one wanted to let their guard down yet, especially since Cherix didn't confirm that his wife and Kirsche had a telepathic conversation. He thought that what he said was better than telling the villagers about the telepathy, especially since Kirsche couldn't confirm that all the dissenters went after her, and they hadn't found a killer yet. Cherix did ask Bonnie how the kids had hidden, so they could try hiding, but Bonnie hadn't asked that question. Cherix knew the women of the village were all supposed to be practicing the telepathy, but he thought it was too early to confirm that it worked. He briefly wondered if Kirsche had actually connected to Bonnie, or if Kirsche had allowed the connection somehow. Kilty awoke after a short nap. She went to the reading room and found the note. Her leg was hurting her today, so she didn't really feel like exploring. She sat in a chair that was too large for her small frame, but it was comfortable. She opened her magic book to read, but she didn't feel like reading either. Then Kilty heard a voice. I believe I owe you a story. Kilty looked up and around, but she saw no one. Grandpa, is that you? How can I hear you? A Pont chuckled. The castle has a lot of magic, so we could talk without you having an orb. I'm still using the sphere, but it works. What story would you like? Oh, I don't know. Tell me a pretty story. A Pont thought a few minutes. Then he launched into a story about him meeting a Moldena and how beautiful she was. He told of their first several dates. He skipped some of their fights and then told of the wedding ceremony. Kirian wasn't sure he wanted a personal orb key, and he certainly didn't want to wear it and talk to the people in the Ultrararium, but he wanted Kilty healed. He started searching and trying to feel things with his heart, but his heart was torn and would not show him the hidden location. He found a passage in the back of a fireplace like Kirsche had. He at first thought the fireplace was in a strange place because it was in the middle of a long hall, but he remembered Kirsche telling him things, so he tried. He found several books of interest. When he found the ones on heraldry, he remembered Kirsche telling him about a floor, or a picture on a floor. He would have to look for that later. He brought the books to the reading room and heard a few lines of the grandfather's story, but he didn't pay too much attention. Kirian continued searching for several hours and was about to give up when he saw a rumpled rug under a coffee table. He knelt down and felt the reason for the rumple was because of an iron hinge. He moved the coffee table and rolled the rug out of the way. Kirian stood staring at the floor door for several minutes. Finally, he opened it. Kirian quickly descended the stairs. After a couple of flights down, he saw another staircase up. Kirian tilted his head back and looked up the stairs. He said to himself, I bet my orb key is up there. But he looked down the stairs he was on. But I might need a staff, and that is probably down here. He continued down the stairs and found things to be very much like Kirsche had described. The exact layout was different, but Kirian didn't know that. The stars were different, but Kirian didn't know that either. He wasn't as nervous as Kirsche had been about losing sight of the staircase that looked like a lone tower, and he wasn't as nervous about removing the staff. When the staff shrank and lay in his hand, he just stared down at it. He wanted to tell Kirsche that he found his staff, but he needed the orb key first. Kirian headed back to the stairs and started his ascent. When he came to a landing with the second set of stairs going up, He just stood there and looked up. He wasn't ready to have his orb. He wasn't sure he wanted it at all. He told himself to go up the stairs for Kilty, but part of him feared having to use the key to hand Kilty over, and he didn't want to do that. Just go up, he told himself, and he lifted one foot to the bottom step. But still, he stood there and could not make himself climb. Finally, he lifted his second foot and started his climb. His legs felt so weary to him. He wasn't sure how long the climb took him, but he finally managed to come out in the top of the tower. He took a few minutes to look around. He went to the half walls and looked out across the land. He saw no castle below him. He saw no river. It was just a vastness. Kirian turned back inside the tower and opened his hand that held the staff. He gripped it, and it became normal size. He found the place in the floor to place it, and everything worked like Kirsha said. Only the stone on the pedestal was a brilliant orange. When he worked with metal and wood and fire, he could stare into a fire for hours. It was the most relaxing thing to him. Kirian reached out and took the stone in his hand. He looked inside. He brought his face closer and thought he saw Kilty. Kilty was running her finger along the words in her magic book, but she was running her finger too fast to actually be reading. Kirian looked in the orb until he found Kirsha. Kirsha seemed to be in different clothes, but she was exploring and looking through some things she had found. Then Kirian saw the sphere and the people around it. "Hello, son," came a voice. "I'm here with your mother and grandfather." The figure motioned behind himself. "There are several scientists watching as well. Your sister, Kirsha, has broken probably every magic law we have. She can do things nobody here knows how to do. The scientists are taking notes." "But that's just been since recently," put in Apont. "Kirsha had her orb before the scientists made the sphere. But the sphere is how Kirsha was able to talk to some of the different people." Kirian just nodded his head. "The orb is yours, son," stated Arisha. "If you don't want to wear it like Kirsha does, that is fine. But please don't let the dissenters know you have it." "I'm not bringing Kilty to you," stated Kirian. "We heard you tell Kirsha that," stated Arik. "Kirsha saw the dissenters out the castle window," stated Kirian. "The castle has a lot of magic, son," stated Arik. "You can speak to a scientist or us. Ask any question. You should probably stay in the castle a few days before you continue on. Kilty worked a spell. Let her work more. You don't want to meet the dissenters unprepared." "Thanks," replied Kirian. Then he noticed the top of the staff had slid down, so he dropped the orb inside and let it close. He laid the staff down on the floor and then sat against the half wall of the tower. He needed to think through things without Kirsha and Kilty nearby. The next several days, the three siblings went about exploring or reading. Neither Kirsha nor Kirian used their orb to speak with anyone in Ultrarium, but Kirsha did use telepathy to speak with Bonnie Brooklyn, and it seemed the nerves in the village had calmed down tremendously. Kirsha had found a knife to strap on and carry, and she told Bonnie about it. When she thought with Bonnie a few days later, Bonnie told her that the men were making those for everyone as well. Kirsha found a room with clothes for Kilty, so she got Kilty to go with her and try them on. Kirsha liked the clothes because they were pants for her and Kilty instead of the long dresses. There were also sandals, which Kirsha read about in one of the books. Kirsha found a knife for Kilty to strap on. Kirsha found an armory of sorts. There were no suits of armor, but there were knives and spears and gems. Kirsha showed it to Kirian and Kilty, and she hoped Kirian would choose a knife for himself. But she didn't press him. Kirsha didn't take a spear. and wasn't sure how to use it, even after she read about it in a book. A smith of some sort fashioned the gems and the rings and necklaces, and while Kirsha was not sure how they worked either, she gathered some for herself and Kilty. She practiced a little bit with the gems in the courtyard, but she didn't feel proficient with them. Finally, they felt ready to leave, and they loaded things in the wagon. Then they were going to see if they could get the horse down the ramp. The horse refused to go, even with Kirian on one side and Kirsha on the other. Kirsha got frustrated. Okay, that's it. She raised her arms and recited a spell. Only it wasn't precisely from one of her books, because she purposely changed a few words. The horse rose up slightly, and Kirian backed away. The horse shrank in size until he could fit in Kirsha's hand, and then she walked down the ramp and set the horse in front of the wagon. She made sure he was facing the correct way. Don't enlarge him yet, stated Kirian. Let me get in place. The plan worked, and the horse stood in front of the wagon. Kirian quickly harnessed the wagon to the horse. Then they untied the raft and continued floating down the lesser vein until they joined the main vein, and then they floated out of the castle. All three felt like they were leaving a sanctuary, and they didn't want to leave, and most of that feeling had nothing to do with the food they found. Kilty had no orb, but in the castle, her grandfather told her stories every day, and he helped her practice her magic and understand things. Kirsha, although she professed a hate for the village, now had a connection to Bonnie Brooklyn, and since she gained that telepathic connection in the castle, she felt the castle was the reason for the connection. Although Kirian hadn't used his orb, he still found his orb in the castle. And now as they floated away, he regretted not using the orb. Kirsha suggested that they float down the river until dusk, and then they exit the river. Kirian asked how they were going to exit the river, and Kirsha didn't know, but said she was thinking about it. Kilty automatically thought about how Kirsha put the horse on the raft, but she didn't say anything. If Kirsha didn't think of something, she might suggest shrinking the raft. Most everyone was staying in their homes again, but they had the males patrolling the outskirts. Cherix approached Bonnie in their home. I know you are a little shy around some of the villagers, and for some of this stuff, I have a feeling we shouldn't outright share. I mean, that's why I told the villagers of the knives the way I did. I wasn't trying to take credit or, oh, Cherix, I know. I thought it was brilliant, especially since I couldn't draw the knife Kirsha is now carrying. So Mr. Rubens, who is a butcher and knows a lot about knives, can get together with Mr. Dontower and they can design it. I was very glad you didn't give me or Kirsha any credit. Well, I have two things I want to say around that. One, I want you to carry a knife. I just feel like not all the dissenters went after Kirsha. Maybe I'm paranoid. Two, I want you to teach me the telepathy. So when I'm patrolling, we stay connected. Bonnie looked at Cherix with wide eyes. Oh, yes, that would be good. So they went to an inner bedroom, and started practicing. Okay, writers, that's the end of chapter 13. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to reading your chapter 13. Leave a comment below on if you would leave Kilty with her parents in the Ulterarium, or if you would try to restore the city. Would you be angry with your parents if they left you like this? What about the dissenters? Leave a comment on what you think about them. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe and hit the bell so you can continue writing with me. Send your chapter 13 as a PDF or Word document to writewithmykela@gmail.com. Visit my website and read about the characters in Mykela 1. My website is www.bymykela.com. That's www.bymykela.com. Leave a comment on how many bios you've read so far, or let me know your favorite characters so far. On Tuesday, we will have a little jargon and a little writing prompt. Our jargon is going to be metaphors and similes with a short writing prompt. Nothing to fear, just a little bitty prompt. On Friday, we will read chapter 14 from the City of the Ancients, West Point Villa. I hope to see you both days. Thank you for joining me. I appreciate your participation. If you know someone who would like this video, then please share it with them. This is Mykela with Write with Mykela. Bye for now.